Doing something a little different today, going live. Um, this is more of a general conversation. It ain't really a conversation, it's more just like a chat. Like fellas at a bar, just kind of kicking it, catching up on things. So I got a little burger I'm going to be finishing up. Got my work laptop on the side. This will be a working live, but kind of doing this for fun. Um, I started setting up these. I set up my YouTube channel for fun initially, and kind of somewhere along the way, it was starting to turn into a little bit more of a job. I started to feel like I had to generate new content, and that's not really what this is about. This is more just, this is sort of a low-key channel for people who have questions, or for guys, basically guys like me, who are trying to figure out, who are trying to explore their options. Options for lots of things, primarily options for um, dating and ways to approach it that, can give them better results than they've had. That's really the idea. Um, but as I've continued to work on this, part of what I've noticed is, just start learning about content, sort of what type of content people really seem to be able to work with. Um, what are the ideas that really get people interested? What are the ideas that don't? And I'm trying to put all of that, um, package it up, not just so that you see big problems, because that's, there's plenty of stuff out there where you've got people talking about problems. And part of what I'm trying to do is really help people to see that there are solutions to some of these issues that they're facing. And if we can get to solutions, conversations where we're actually talking about solutions, then I think we're actually doing something. Then that's how people get some help. So that's really where the focus is. Now, let me just sort of lay out for people facts. Without getting specifically into exactly how much I made, I'm in top 5% of earners. So I can relate to being in that sort of an income bracket. I can relate to interacting with people in that income bracket, because most of my peers, same thing, work in the pharmaceutical industry. Most of the people around me are making six figures. Some of them are making more. So in that regard, I've got some perspective on sort of what it takes to work in the industry that I'm in, but also some perspective on other things that could work. And that's kind of for the guys. For the women, it's more just a thought around, if you're trying to attract a guy who moves a certain way, who's in that kind of income bracket, understand that he's going to look for a woman who's going to be able to fit in to his lifestyle. I think that's the biggest challenge I see with the women that I meet, is that they don't really think about what this man's life is going to look like, about the kind of woman that he's going to be looking for. They just say, hey, you make a lot of money and I want to be part of your life because it would help me, with no concept about, is this woman going to be helping him? And that's where problems come in. Now, just for perspective, like my route to where I am in my career. And this is not to say this isn't the only way to get there, but it's the path I took, and it's something you should consider. Um, I went to college in Texas. Then I went to grad school in Georgia. I got a master's degree in a field that I'd been working in college, and just stuck with it. Coming out of grad school, I went to a very good grad school, went to the University of Georgia, which has an excellent Master's of Market Research program. If you are kind of a numbers person, um, and you have the opportunity to do it, basically figure that you give up about a year of your life because you're going to be taking a very heavy course load, but it's only 1 year, like double the course load, half the time. And after that year, you have a job market that you won't realize existed before. That was the thing for me. So I worked, I'd been working for a company in college, worked for all my college career, same company, because I was familiar with the type of work. So it was easy for me to get into. I go to my senior year, talking to another guy I know there who I respect, who had gone to this master's program, specifically for the field that I was in, and he was telling me about it. I honestly never considered grad school at that point because I just figured, I was going to graduate, stay local because all of my family's from Texas, and I figured I would work kind of in the Dallas, Fort Worth metroplex. But he's talking to me about grad school, and even then, my first thought was, this is probably going to be expensive. Maybe I want to work a couple of years first, save up some money, and then do this. But he explained how it worked. If you get in, you got to we take the GMAT because it's more math oriented than, or which was, we took we didn't take the standard test. Now it's been for an age, so I'm trying to keep my name straight. But fundamentally, we took the math-oriented grad school test, and you had to have a minimum score that you hit to get in, which I delivered against. And once you're in, there's no cost. There are not a lot of people who have master's degree in the field that I'm in. So there are a lot of people from the industry who pay this program to make it easier for people to go through it if they qualify by getting good scores. So suddenly I'm in grad school and I don't have to pay a dime for tuition. Basically, I just had to kind of cover the cost of, my cost of living. Books were covered. I got an assistantship, which covered the cost of books plus a little bit more. But go through grad school. It's a year of crazy workload, but it was a fun time because you really built camaraderie. We basically had one classroom that was devoted just to us. There were a handful of us, maybe 15 of us. And that was our classroom every day, Monday through Friday. We were in there. It was the same group of us. We kind of had our spots, and we just were fed all these principles on market research, statistics, psychology, a lot of things that were going to be really important for us to understand in the field that we were going into. Here's what grad school opened up for me that I had never thought about. I mean, literally, I thought, okay, I'm going to a good school, but I still had my small town mindset. I'm going to move back home, find a job, one of the local companies. I guess I'll get a little bit better job now. Family's there, and we'll be fine. Well, University of Georgia's Master's in Market Research program is, one of the best, if not the best, market research program in the country. When you're about to graduate from that program, you don't have to go looking for a job. Companies come to you. I had the administrator for the program kind of pull me aside going through course load and asked me the question, you haven't signed up for any of these presentations. Do you want to explore jobs with any of these companies? And I thought, oh yeah, I know you guys are doing this. I haven't figured out where I want to go to recruit. So, I'm thinking that I want to find companies who are in Texas, and I want to go approach them about job opportunities. But she just explained to me that at the University of Georgia, that wasn't really what they did. I mean, you could do that, but that's the hard road. She said, no. Let me explain something to you. These companies are coming here because they want you. You don't have to pitch. You have to listen to them and decide if they're the kind of companies you want to work for. Now, that was like the first shoe dropping. I thought, wait, what are you talking about? You got Coca-Cola. Back then, Blockbuster was still around. Kodak. A lot of companies that were huge didn't survive technology and advances in technology, but at the time, Blockbuster was a big deal. General Mills, lots of heavy hitters were coming in, and they wanted to interview us. I thought, well, wait, how does this work? It's like, look, there are only 15 of you, and these companies know that not everybody's going to get one of you to come work for them. So they're coming to compete for you. Now that other shoe is dropping. Wait a minute. You mean that because I went to this program, I get to participate in the job hunt, and I'm the prize. I'm the one who they're looking for. The job isn't suddenly the prize. But I can have a take it or leave it attitude towards Coca-Cola, towards General Mills, towards Clorox. Okay, I'd never been in that kind of a position before where it's like, I'm choosing what I want to do, who I want to talk to, and how I want to move. I interviewed with like I went to a lot of pitches. I went to everybody's pitch. I go to a pitch, the company talks to you about what it's like to work for them. Afterwards, they take everyone out for dinner, sometimes dinner and drinks. It's like, wow, this is a whole different way of thinking about job hunting. But that was what life was becoming. I ended up going to General Mills to intern because they just had a great, internship or a great internship program. But more importantly, there was a guy that I was going to be working with who really wanted to teach. And that was important to me. I didn't just want to go someplace and be a cog. I wanted to go someplace where someone was going to be managing me who actually saw value in teaching new people the ropes. You can find plenty of jobs where, hey, here's a stack of assignments, get to it. But someone who wants to take the time to help you understand what's going on, sort of walk you through the process. That's what I was looking for, and that's why I ended up going to General Mills. Sadly, they made some org restructures, and so the weekend that I was driving up, they were switching out business units, and I was working for someone else. A good person, but they weren't who I went to work for. They weren't who I went to work under. They didn't have the same, to them it was, okay, here's a new guy, here's some work, get to it. Wasn't what I was looking for. Moral of the story here, because General Mills is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had originally planned to get a job in Texas and work, kind of work in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, maybe Houston, maybe Austin, something like that. I came out of the University of Georgia with a degree that opened up a whole world of opportunities to me that I had never thought about before, just never considered. And as long as I was willing to move, sure, there was a company that interviewed me that was out of Texas. It was out of Houston specifically. and the location was attractive. Okay, like 4 hours away from my parents, so I can go visit them pretty easily on the weekends. Um, yeah, Quint, I like your point there. Women care about money. If you don't have it, be able to make them laugh. I'll tell you something on that, man, because you're right, but there's a trick to it. Women are, here's what women care about, and they don't talk about it, but this is that slippery slope where you start to look at women and say, you know what, you're going to have a hard time finding a guy the way you move. Women have even higher standards for what they're looking for than men. Men, we generally want women who look like, do you have a nice face? Do you have a nice body? Are you fun to hang around? Yeah. We're pretty basic. As long as we like the way you look, as long as you're fun, okay, cool. Women want that. But on top of that, you got to have money. You got to be tall. You got to be handsome. Um, if a guy's not handsome, women start treating him like he's like meatloaf. And the funny thing is, when you look at the women who have these attitudes, it's like, you know what, ma'am, you got like a plain face and you're overweight. So you're talking about guys who are tall and fit and are delivering all these boxes. It's like, well, do you deliver any of this? Are you attractive? Do you have a nice face? Do you have a nice body? I mean, I'll tell you, I was on Kinder G 2 weeks ago, and I got a ton of responses as a result of it. And here was a funny thing. This was so shocking to me. Now, I was very clear. It's like, I do well financially, and I'm looking for a woman to build with. But if you want to be part of this, there's some things that you need to do. You need to be fit. You need to be childless. Now, fit is tricky because, like, everybody's got their own definition of fit, and you talk to two people, you're going to get two different opinions about it. Some women, like thick, especially like black community. Like thick is different for us. I see a woman who's thick, and I can say, you know what, that looks good. Some people see thick and then they just see fat. But part of the trick is that you talk to women and you say fit. You have a lot of women who will say they're fit when they're not. They're just not. They want to convince you that they are. But you're like, I know what fit looks like, and I know what fit moves like. So, do you actually want to step up and be part of this? Do you want to work out? Do you want to actually get in shape, or do you just want to wear like tight clothes? That becomes sort of the thing. Like you're wearing tight clothes to make it look like you're not as big as you are, but we can tell the difference. So that becomes part of that. But kind of back to the Kinder G piece. Now, I was very clear. It's like, I do well. I live in a pretty good area. I live right outside Manhattan. It's like I work. I want to be able to enjoy my evenings, have a woman who I can take out in the evening, do fun stuff with. So she needs to have free time in the evenings. And I don't want a woman with kids. Those are basically the things, and be fit. Now, to me, that feels like a good trade-off. Like you get to be a housewife. You get to like spend your afternoons at the yoga temple and spin class, enjoying yourself. And you got a man who actually likes, having a woman who gets to relax and be part of that, be part of that group of women who go to spin classes and fitness and do all that stuff during the day while their men or their husbands are at work because they're just part of that club. You would not believe the backlash that I got from women just angry that I didn't want that. I have a daughter, because I do have a daughter. I have a 10-year-old daughter. So they were angry that I have a daughter, but I didn't want a woman with kids. And their comment was, how is that fair? thought, well, hang on a second. Here, explain this to me. Okay. I'm making a lot of money, and I'm setting you up so that you can be a housewife. You can sit back at home and just relax. So, don't you think it's that you should have something you need to do to balance that out? And that's the thing that was tricky. It's hard for you to be motivated to do well. Yeah, all right. Let's talk about let's all right. Let's talk about you. You got a very good point, Quint. But I'm going to tell you something that's going to be. It's going to seem kind of crazy, but it might open your eyes to some things. One of the hardest things to do these days as a black man is find a black woman who you can build with for a lot of reasons. I mean, if we do this, if we just do the stats, just basic stats, black women are generally they're the least likely to be married. They're the least likely to want to get married. They don't stay in marriages as long as anyone else. And there's just less support that you're going to see from black women, from black men. So if you are a black man and you are focusing on dating black women, you are going to have a much harder time than if you just open things up and say, I'm going to date people who are interested. I mean, think of it this way. Black women are about 13% of all women. So like one woman in six is a black woman. If you've got six women and you're saying you're only going to date this one and she's difficult, that's a hard situation to be in. I mean, the best thing to do is keep your options open. Now, I don't specifically say only date black women. I don't specifically say avoid black women. I just say, find who makes you happy and do that. But I also point to some things that people don't necessarily think about, but that's important to consider, especially if you've got the means to do it. I mean, one of the best places if you want a good woman right now, today, the best place to go is the Philippines. And not everybody's got the means to do that, but think about this. The Philippines is not that expensive to set yourself up in for 2 weeks. If you can take 2-week vacation, fly out to the Philippines, not that expensive. Man, there are tons of YouTube content and creators out there who talk about what it's like your first day in the Philippines. I mean, these are guys who are good guys. They're not necessarily super handsome, super tall, super fit. They don't necessarily have big money, but they're good, solid guys who want to have relationships, want wives, want families, and they're flying to the Philippines because when you're in the Philippines, the world is different. The women over there culturally are more oriented to looking for husbands, valuing husbands and relationships and families. Yeah, I mean, you can go to the Philippines. I was pricing this out. Now, I priced something out for the Philippines trip, and I was looking at something that was kind of extravagant. I mean, I was like, I'll go down there, and what if I went there for a month, and if I stayed in kind of a nice place the whole time I'm there. If I went and I wanted to, and I'm talking flight, everything. If I wanted to go to the Philippines, live well for a month, meet women, I could do that whole thing for $5,000. Now that's living extravagant. You want to go there for 2 weeks? You want to get a deal on a flight? You can do a round trip to the Philippines, live there for 2 weeks, live well, and you can do it for $1,000, maybe $2,000, depends on how well you want to live. But talk to the guys. Look at the videos the guys post about what it's like when you get to the Philippines and you're looking for women. You go to the Philippines and they talk about how you might not make it out of the airport before women over there are looking at you and approaching you because they're interested. You go to the mall just to buy a shirt or just to get something to eat, and the women are approaching you because they're interested. If you're in the Philippines, there are a couple of things to think about. First, number one, Philippines, average income in the Philippines is nothing like what it is in America. So even if you're an average dude over there, you're making money. You're a big money guy. And that's attractive. Guy who's stable. It's not just they want your money. I mean, there are certain places to avoid. Like, don't go out there and go clubbing, or you're going to find girls in the Philippines who got Western mindsets. You might as well stay here. You're going to get the same kind of women you would get here. No, you want like those countryside girls, the the women who are not party girls, who got the family values. Oh yeah, um, you can go to the Philippines and you can find women who are going to be excited about you. One, you're coming from a country that's got a lot more um, going for it than the Philippines. Two, and this people don't think about this. When you go to the Philippines, you're exotic. Same way, if you brought your Filipino wife here, she's exotic, she's rare. You're exotic over there. So now you suddenly are a whole lot more interesting um, to women in general because they're looking at you and saying, "Hey, I don't see this every day, and I like this, and I want to, I want to talk to this guy." Now, the funny thing, because when I was looking at the Philippines and I was doing the research to try to just understand what it would be like, what really sold me on it was this. The Filipino women weren't just looking for guys to bring them back to the West. No, there were guys who were going to the Philippines because they decided that that's where they wanted to retire. That's where they wanted to live out their years. And these women were still in love with guys who were living in the Philippines, who weren't moving them to the West. It wasn't about finding somebody who could bring them back to, the promised land. No, it was just about having a relationship with a guy who was a good provider, could be a good husband, could be a good father. And that's it. And for most guys, that's what we're looking for. You check out these Filipino women, and they're generally going to be more petite. So you're getting, if what you want is fit, fun to be around, an army of them just walking around, not just walking around, but looking for you. I encourage. I mean, I've got a nephew who's about to graduate, and he and I are going to have a conversation because he's going to hit this dating market, and he's going to be a junior analyst somewhere, bottom of the totem pole. He's got to start out at the bottom and work his way up. And there are going to be a lot of difficult life lessons he's going to have to learn about just the dating market today and the way it is. And everybody's got to start at the bottom. At some point, you got to be at the bottom and work your way up from there. Everybody's got to kind of deal with that. The question is, can you find something that works for you in that situation? Who wants to sit around for years waiting until they build themselves up so that they can have something? That's just not, that's a tough sell for anybody. So yeah, building that up is a big deal. That's just a big deal. Finishing up here, doing the whole lunch thing. That was a bit of a tangent from where I was originally going, but that's what this conversation is about. This is not here so much for the lecture. I'm here just, for exactly what was happening. Guys coming in with questions, guys coming in with thoughts, and just being able to say, okay, let's kind of talk it through. But kind of back to, if we go way back, the moves. Okay, so I'm at General Mills, making more money than I've ever made, and realizing that my life can look very, very different now. Career opportunities are going to be different. My thoughts about where I live, moving around, are very different. All of a sudden, the world it has changed for me in a good way. Now, why do I bring that up? When you start to talk about, becoming a high earner, there's some things you need to consider. Sure, everybody wants to be a high earner, but not everybody's going to take the steps. And that's really part of the question is, are you going to take the steps? Education is one of the simplest ways to get there. Get a degree in a field that pays well, and yeah, you are pretty much guaranteeing yourself that you are going to be a six-figure guy. If you're good with numbers, you're just better off, because there are a lot of fields that are easy to get into if you're good with numbers, that are very predictable in terms of what you're going to do, and talk to engineers. It's pretty hard not to be a six-figure guy as an engineer. You gotta kind of really mess things up to not eventually hit your stride as an engineer. As you start to get into other fields, there are lots of fields where you don't necessarily have to be good at math, but those are a little bit less predictable. So, one surefire path to getting there is education. Not everybody's in the position to be able to do that, though. So you got to take a look at kind of where you are and whether that's the right path for you. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Some of the other things, though, that you'll notice, or that I noticed, were that once I got to a place where I was making, pretty good money, and I was working around people who were making pretty good money, attitudes changed. I'll let you in on a secret. This whole high earner mystique that everybody kind of pitches, it's kind of baloney. Look, guys who make big money, okay, not superheroes. We don't have capes on our chests. We're not stomping around, 10 feet taller than everybody else. We're regular guys. Just regular guys who, are good at something that is worth paying employees for. You can be good at a lot of things that you might be the best customer service rep on the planet. Customer service is just not a field that pays that well. Best cashier on the planet. Cashiers aren't going to get paid that well. The difference between the best and the worst, not that meaningfully different from a profitability standpoint. Sure, you might make a few more customers feel good about their purchase. Maybe you even encourage, someone to come back and revisit the store for another shopping trip. But at the end of the day, yeah, that's not generally where you win. So you got a lot of guys who are high earners, and still we're just regular guys. Like, you know what? I go to work, I go to the gym. I literally, just kind of focus on me and doing the things that I like, and that I try to spend as much of my time focusing on, because that's how I want to live my life. I want to live my life focused on the things that I enjoy. Now, it can be really tricky because you're an earner, you're doing well, you're generally focused on your life. You're not necessarily running in circles where you meet women. I'm 51. The women who I meet generally are married. The women who I see on a regular basis are either married or they're a lot younger than me. My morning times at the gym, there are plenty of women there. Most of them look like they're kind of early 20s. Nice to look at. Don't get me wrong, but they're going to be looking for guys who are in their age range. And you'll occasionally see that one or two women show up who are 40 plus. They are rarely single. Also, they are rarely black, which is interesting. You just don't see it. White women, Asian women. That's who I see. Well, white women, and I do see an occasional Hispanic woman. In the gym, 40 plus, white women, Asian women. And you have to, you just have to think about some of the women who are out here and who say they want high earners, but who aren't at the gym. One of my first pieces of advice to any woman who's looking for a guy who makes six figures. One of my first pieces of advice. I don't care about your situation with your kids, their dad, your income, your degree. I don't care about any of that. It would be weight. How are you built? Are you skinny? Are you slim? Are you fit? Are you something like that? Or are you a heavy or medium or larger? Step one is just going to be appeal. Step one is going to be appeal. And just going out and saying, well, you want a guy who makes good money because you just do. That's not going to work. I mean, sure, you might get a guy to pay attention to you for a minute, but if you want a serious relationship, do you think you're going to get a serious relationship with a guy if you're not offering anything other than expenses? Because that's kind of what that conversation starts to become is, what are you offering other than expenses? When I was on Kendra G, tons of women reached out. Most of them were women who were heavy-set single mothers. Now I understand kind of the thought, which is, hey, this guy could be a solution to a lot of my problems. I get that. But what surprises me is there's really no thought beyond that. From a negotiating standpoint, like, okay, you want this guy, but have you thought about whether or not this guy wants you? And they really don't stop to think about that part of it. Tons of women are out there hoping to be picked at random. And that's just not how it works. There are tons of women out there who are just reaching out, and they'll give you their story about how they deserve to find love, they're good people, all this stuff about how they've been good, solid people, They were in situations that weren't ideal. Now they are, raising children to the best of their ability and just trying to focus on living as well for the remainder of their lives as they can. And I get that. I think we're all trying to live our lives well. That's it's just human nature. But you get stuck with this question, which is, look, I understand what you want, but do you understand anything about what I want? As in my current situation, I don't want to deal with a woman who has children because women want to be married. Women don't want to date. They want wedding rings. And that's where things start to fall apart. There is no way on earth I'm going to sign up to be financially responsible for some other man's kids. I have a daughter, and she is my responsibility. I'm not expecting anybody else to sign up to cover the cost there. I wouldn't really want some other guy signing up and trying to cover the cost because I don't want any other guy trying to parent my kid. That's my kid. Um, I don't think I'll ever actually have to deal with that. Long story short, I mean, without getting into too much detail, if you meet my ex-wife, you would understand. I don't know that she's going to find another relationship. Relationships have never been that important to her. She hasn't been in many in her life. And I don't think that she would ever really prioritize. Her priority is her career. I don't think she's ever going to think about relationships and finding someone. Not so long as she can, kind of build her career and improve her bank account. One day she might change her mind, but at that point, the market for her when she's 65-ish, whatever, retired, is going to be very different than it would have been for her at 30 or 20. The women who are approaching want guys, but they don't actually want to do anything to get the guys. And we're talking basic stuff here. Don't get me wrong, losing weight is not easy. uh, I can speak from personal experience. I gained during COVID, probably gained 15 pounds at my heaviest, which for me is a big deal because I've been the same weight for decades. So suddenly gaining those 15 pounds, like, whoa, what happened to me? I got a belly. I never had a belly. And I've been working to burn it all off. I've had weeks where I'm doing really well, and then weeks where I kind of regress. But in general, it's moving in the right direction. So I'm not gonna pretend like losing weight is easy at all. Just not gonna do that. But if I told a woman, if I told a woman, let's say I told a woman who weighs like 180 pounds, look, get down to 150 and you'll find yourself a six-figure man. You will absolutely land a six-figure man. But you got to get to 150 and you got to maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, he's gonna bounce. I wonder how many women would actually do that. I don't know. But it's a question. It's if you knew that losing the weight would get you the man that you want, would you do it? And if you knew that keeping the weight off would keep the man, would you do it? So that's a question. Women will talk about their plans. They plan to lose weight, or they've started their weight loss journey. But who cares? I want to see the finished product. I'm the finished product. I'm the guy who's making the kind of money they want. I'm not the guy who's on his way. And guys who are on their way, women don't give those guys the time of day. If you looked at me when I first came out of grad school, clearly I was on my way to being successful, but I wasn't there yet. I was just a junior guy in a company, starting to figure things out. Most women don't want to be bothered. You don't have, the world at your fingertips at that point. You got to be very selective and very smart to find women who are interested. Maybe they're interested in you long term, or in my case, maybe they're just interested short term for some fun. But you have to kind of figure out where you fit. It's not until you actually have it that their mindset changes and they realize, oh, okay, you are where I want you to be. Now they may realize you look at them and like, well, okay, ma'am, you're not where I want you to be. They expect the forgiveness for that. They need to be allowed to build, but you can't be allowed to build. And that's where a lot of the problems, come from. But that's not how it's going to work. It's not how it's going to work for me. Like, I'll meet you where you are if you can do the same. Women who have nice figures can always do a little bit better than women who don't. And to women who have kids, the question really becomes, okay, why are you a better option than a man? Why are you a better option to a man who's making money than a woman who is in your same boat but doesn't have kids? Okay. You're 41, you've got 3 kids. I get it. It's not a weird situation to be in at 41, but okay. I can go find somebody who's 41 and childless and probably very interested in having a kid because, our clock is ticking. That's a better situation for me. Either way, I'm spending my money taking care of the kid. But in one situation, I'm taking care of my kid, and in another situation, I'm taking care of somebody else's. There's a lot we could do. I mean, the whole thing on kind of women and where they're going and what we want to do when we see women. That's like a separate. There's a whole segment on that. That's like several hours of content all by itself. But my thing is for guys. When we get back to that, money matters. It's not the be all end all, but it does matter. If you are a handsome guy, if you're a pretty boy, things are going to be easy for you. That's just how it is. You're not going to have to learn how to build the way some people do. You're not going to have to learn how to really sell yourself. And you'll get guys who may say they've got game or they've got whatever. I don't care about any of that. If you're starting off beautiful, you're not really selling yourself. You're just making sure you don't do something disastrous. It's kind of like like a Porsche. Better yet, a Ferrari. I don't see tons of ads on TV for Ferraris. I don't need to. I know what a Ferrari is. Most people do. I know that a Ferrari communicates status. I know a Ferrari um, performs better. I know Ferraris look beautiful. You don't have to sell me on the idea of a Ferrari. It sells itself. Now, Ferraris are expensive, which is why not everybody has them, can't afford them, aren't enough of them to go around. If they sold all the Ferraris that were built, people still wouldn't have them. There aren't enough. Um, that's part of the beauty of being beautiful. You don't have to sell yourself. Um, you just have to make sure you don't screw it up. If you're a plain looking guy, you just got a plain face. Um, you don't have that benefit. You don't get to just sell yourself. You're gonna have to work. You are gonna have to develop, personality. Have a passion for something that's interesting. You're gonna have to be, you're gonna have to choose wisely. Don't choose the beauty queen. Don't choose the pageant winner. Choose the normal woman who's slim and fun. Guy has a good sense of humor. You have to make like decisions. On the goods on the one hand, you know, it can teach you more about people because you have to spend more time. I'm saying we have to spend more time understanding people and who they are and where their value lies. I can safely say now at this point in my life, being beautiful is not the end all be all. When I was 16, yeah, that was all that mattered. Do you look good? You're a cheerleader, you're a dancer, yeah. You look splendid. I don't care how your attitude is. That was my mindset back then. Um, and I slowly had to learn because, those women who I wanted who were beautiful, their expectations were through the roof. They were nightmares to deal with because they were young hotties and they knew everybody was after them and they didn't have to work. They didn't have to be decent people. They just needed to look good. You get older and you start experiencing life and you start to realize that you want more than just a pretty face. You want someone who you can actually work with. And that's where things can become, that's where things can become interesting. Because that's where you can start to say, I know who I am, I know what I like. I know kind of what my limits are, what I'm okay with, what I'm not okay with. Case in point, when I was in like, I'm not a smoker, never have been. Not my thing. Most you'll find me doing is smoking the occasional stogie with some buddies, but I don't even do that very often. College, dated a woman, she looked great. She was a smoker. I was willing to deal with that in college because still I was a young guy. Looks mattered more to me than just about anything else. And dealing with a smoker, to have someone who looked the way she did, yeah, that was that was fine. Sign me up. No, I have to deal with that now. Um, because I know what I do and don't want in my life. And it's that same idea. You start to learn, not so much about cigarette smoke, although that's an example, but you start to learn about personalities. And you're able to say, look, what do I want in my life? What kind of person enhances my life? And then what kind of person is just a drag, pardon the pun. Um, that's kind of the challenge for women. If you're looking for this guy who makes the six figures, what are you doing to not be a drag on his life? He can pull you up, but there needs to be something in it for him. There needs to be something in it for me, or I just don't want to deal with it. So that's something to consider. Now, I went off. This was initially going to be kind of a different sort of show where I was going to be working and kind of just pulling this in, but had a couple of comments, and so I just wanted to address some of those ideas that Quint had come up with about being motivated in a situation like this. See somebody else just popped in. Be sure to click the like button if you got questions, feel free to drop them in. So yeah, money. If you become a high earner, it will definitely help. Let's face it. Dating when you're a high earner can be as simple as bringing one of your buddies to a bar and picking up a tab. Not even a big tab. I mean, you walk in, women aren't interested in you. They're taller, fitter guys, all around the bar. But pick up a $100 tab by yourself. Like, okay, I got the drinks, and you'll get eyeballs on you. Suddenly, people are looking and thinking, who's this guy? Picking that up pretty casually. You'll be surprised at how some women change the way they respond to you once they know you have money. Now, it's not all. I mean, forget the myth. There's a misconception that's being pushed that if you make six figures, everybody wants you. That's not true. Some women will want you. Some of them will actually, seriously be interested because they're looking for a guy that can provide them with a certain kind of lifestyle. But even among the women who want you, some of them just want some free drinks. So, you kind of have to just watch yourself and decide, what do you want to do? Now, there are things that become easier, things that become a lot easier. Go to the coffee shop more. I work out of a coffee shop generally. So, and I'll just bounce around to different coffee shops in the area. I go to a coffee shop, and I've got two laptops because I've got my business and my personal laptop, and I'm doing things on both. And people hear conversations I'll have where I've got, I have just people I'll be working with and people I'll be talking to about some issues. In the field where I work, there are certain things that I won't do out in the open because we can get into sensitive topics. We talk about drugs and development and stuff like that. So I'm not going to sit around and have those kinds of conversations in a coffee shop. But sometimes we're just having general conversations about like doctors and how they treat and how they're making decisions and, just like questions we have about why doctors do the things that they do. Those are conversations that I can have in a coffee shop. And when women are listening, because you can hear people, everybody shoulder to shoulder, you'll see the eyes perk up. I hear what this guy's talking about. Okay, this is somebody who doesn't have a regular job, so he probably doesn't make a regular salary. And sure, that is going to get you into some situations that you otherwise wouldn't be in. Pretty privilege works, and if you're pretty, that's going to get you into some situations that people who aren't pretty don't get to see. If you're financially successful, that's also going to get you into some situations that other people don't get to see. You just have to, play the trade-offs. So one of the questions becomes, are you able to put yourself in a position where you are, financially well off? And I don't mean rich. I mean Making $1 million a year, there aren't a lot of people in the world who can do that. Less than 1%. I mean, 1/10 of 1% of people do that. Forget all that. No, $60,000 a year. $60,000 a year is above average, and $60,000 a year is surprisingly achievable. But you do have to be willing to make some changes in your life. I mean, you have to look at kind of what you're doing now, what you're willing to do to change. $60,000 a year isn't even necessarily going back to school, but it might mean moving 100 miles away to an area where there's demand for a specific type of job, and they need people who are committed to doing it for them in a specific location. One of the biggest enemies to people just getting to levels they want is their television sets. You know what? You could do other types of things. You could do additional work. It is an effort, but it's a lot more fun to sit back and watch Netflix. It's a lot easier to put in a full day's work and then put your feet up and relax because you got to do it the next day. You know, working 12-hour days, 5-6 days a week, that wears on you. Not everybody is wired to be able to do that, let alone to want to do that. What I will say is, if you're willing to work like that, it's almost impossible not to at least hit 60K if you're smart about it. If you want to get 2 cashier jobs, you're not going to hit 60K. But it's easy to kind of ask, why are you working 2 cashier jobs? If you're willing to work that hard, let's look at some other job opportunities where you could put in those same hours and make twice as much money, maybe 3 times as much money. So finances can help you, but you've got to take a hard look at what you're willing to do, what you're willing to change in your life to get to that. Now, I always go back. The best path to financial success is going to be education, because that one is very predictable. Sure, there are plenty of people who are rich and who never graduated college. There are tons more people who didn't graduate college and didn't get rich. I mean, you're playing the lotto if you're hoping to be one of these unique individuals who makes it big with no college degree, and no apparent special skill set that you possess. Now, if you're skilled in something, and that's kind of the beauty, that's really the intersection, is when you're skilled at something and it's something that people want to pay for, that's when you're in a great spot. I'm good with numbers. I've always been comfortable with numbers. For as long as I can remember, math classes were easy to me. I went into a field that's math oriented. I have a job where, at least early on, math was heavily part of what I needed to do my job. And as a result, I do very well. I picked a field that worked for the skills that I have, and that's been comfortable. Not everybody's good at math. So you've got to kind of step back and start thinking, do you have a skill? And if so, what can you do with it? Some things that you have, you may not even realize are skills, but they are. If you speak, if you're bilingual in America, suddenly you've got translator jobs, or jobs where you aren't necessarily a translator, but they need someone who's bilingual because they have lots of Spanish-speaking people who are coming into their office, and it's easier to have someone who's bilingual than to try to work through that. Simply having the language skill puts you in a position where You don't need to settle for minimum wage, not even close. You should be able to find, there are jobs out there that will pay you well simply because you're dual language. And there's an added value that this company has in having a dual language employee. If you are especially good at something, I mean, I don't mean the best in, best in the country, top 10. I just mean you're better than average. If you ranked people in that, with that skill set, you're a 6 or higher. If you're skilled in something and you've got an entrepreneurial mindset, you're willing to go out and work and just try to build it on your own. Government contracts can be a very big opportunity area for you. And let's talk about this for a second, because I want to explain how simple this can be. Let's say what you're good at is yard work. That sounds like, who's not good at yard work, but I mean, no, you've got tractors, you can organize people. You could go out and you could mow a huge field, a couple of fields. You got the ability to pull that together. You got the equipment. Most of the federal work that's happening is contractual. You got, I haven't done the numbers in a while, like $5 billion in federal contracting work. No, excuse me, $500 billion in federal contracting work every year. Now, I don't know what percent of it is landscaping, but figure this. Every federal facility has got a contractor maintaining the grounds. Every federal facility has a contractor who had to compete with other contractors to get a contract to maintain the grounds. Have you ever been to like a business park? Some area where you got it's just all corporations. You got like a huge area. There might be 12 business buildings in that area. It's all, sky rises, it's all companies. A lot of grass, a couple of acres. True story, federal contract came up. And I don't do landscaping, but I was just curious, so I was looking at it. They were hiring someone to maintain the grounds for one of their facilities. You just cut the grass, weed, edge, clip down trees, all that stuff. This was, a business park of about, I don't know, 6 to 8 buildings. I just looked at it on like a map. So, it was decent size, but it wasn't overwhelming. The contract to maintain those grounds, the annual contract was $1 million. Yeah, the contractor who won the contract to maintain those grounds is getting paid $1 million a year. Now there are expenses involved in that, so don't let's not pretend like all that's going in your pocket. You've got vehicles, you've got mowing equipment, you've got fuel, you've got employees. But here's a question: Do you think that you could get a truck, a couple of rideable mowers, a couple of guys to help you out, or shoot, maybe just one friend, and you and him do all the mowing yourselves? Pay gas? Do you think you could mow grounds? Your job becomes like riding a rideable lawnmower a few hours every day, hitting a different section of this compound. Do you think you could do all of that? Get $1 million and have some left over? I mean, I was goofing off with the numbers. When I did it, part of what I was realizing was, if I already had the truck, if I already had the mowers, it's actually really profitable. I wouldn't even have to mow. I would just hire people to do everything, and I coordinate it all. But me looking at it that way, it didn't make tons of money, but I think it still made like $250,000. That goes in your pocket. That's pre-tax, but All right, are you really? If you're making $250,000 pre-tax, is that a problem? I'm assuming not. You're close to being top 1% of earners in America, and you're mowing yards, you're mowing lawns. Point of all of that is, skills. Just having a skill isn't necessarily exotic. Doesn't necessarily mean like, you've spent years and years studying something that only you know how to do. A lot of it's you understand how to do something well and how to market it to people. So, do you have a skill that you can sell yourself on? And if so, what is that? Federal contracting has, lawnmowers, uh, laundromats, hairstylists, cooks, tons of things that are probably not what you would normally associate with the government, but tons of things that are needs. Um, you can suddenly start looking for opportunities just to do things that you already do, but that you can get paid for. So this question can become, if you think about if you think about your situation and your goal is to become a high earner, what skill do you have that someone would pay you for? You've probably got something. If all you do is play Xbox, 8 hours a day, you're not going to make that much doing it. Although even with that, I think they're starting to give out college scholarships. So if you're elite, well, who knows? I don't know what that could look like. Point is, you spend less time on the couch in front of the TV and a little bit more time just focused on saying, what can I sell myself on today? And you might be surprised at where the opportunities are. One of the simplest jobs you can get, just to level up a bit, work in the mailroom of a large company. That is not a difficult job. That's not a minimum wage job either. Your job is, sending and receiving, picking stuff up, walking things around the office, making sure people get the mail that they want. Sometimes you might be asked to do some random additional tasks, like carrying some laptops out of the office and onto some truck because they've got to be, sent someplace. Who knows? Point is, there are lots of opportunities to upgrade. And if you've got that, if you suddenly get that job that pays above minimum wage, well, how much does that improve your situation? And what do you do with the money that you're making now? If you just blow it, well, okay, that's on you. The idea, though, becomes to think about what you can do with that money to continue to improve yourself. Other things to consider. Are you renting or do you own a home? Now, renting is it's convenient in the short term, but financially, you are throwing your money down a hole if you rent. If you're spending $500 a month, I don't know what rents are anymore. You're spending $1,000 a month in rent. That's $12,000 a year that you are throwing away. You're just handing it to somebody else. If you are suddenly living in a home that you own, that $12,000 a year, you're not throwing it away. Now that's money that you're kind of putting in a savings account. So the way to think about it, because you have a home that's built equity, which means that when you sell that home, that $60,000 that you put into the home, you get that back. When you sell it, you have this $100,000 home. You put $60,000 into it. Well, guess what? You sell the home for $100,000. You finish paying off the mortgage. The $60,000 that you put into it, well, now you get that back. It's like, instead of renting and just giving the money away, home ownership is like putting that money into a savings account. Now, it's more complicated because you got additional costs, appreciation, all of that. But let's just keep it simple for a second. Owning your home is investing. You upgrade your situation, kind of going back to the mailroom, just a hypothetical. Now you're making a little more money. Now you can take that money and use it to make a little bit more money by moving from renting to owning. Now you can start doing a few things more intelligent. Saying, look, if you're somebody who loves to lease cars, why don't you stop doing that? Owning things is more valuable than renting things. When you own things, expenses eventually stop. As long as you're borrowing, you're paying. I hate to borrow, hate to lease. I like to own the things that I have. I've never leased a car in my life. Every car I have, I've owned. And basically, I'll get a car. I might get a nice car. I might get a medium-ish car. But once I get it, I'm going to keep that car until it's dying. Once it gets to the point where it's more work to maintain than just to get a new one, sure, time to switch. I don't want the headache. But my goal is not to constantly be paying for things if I don't have to. Not so I can be a cheapskate, but so that I can spend my money doing the things that I like to do. I like to travel. I haven't traveled since COVID, not internationally, but I expect that to pick up, in the next. Truth be told, probably in the next year. But traveling is something that I enjoy. I took a trip to Indonesia to visit my sister a couple of years ago. And that was an expensive trip. I mean, the flights, it's almost a day from New Jersey to Indonesia, having to do a layover in China. It was almost 24 hours travel time to get there, almost 24 hours travel time to get back. Expensive. But you know what? If I was renting, that could have been the equivalent of like a month's rent, 2 months rent. If you're owning, suddenly you've got money, you've got flexibility to start doing some things. Just like, do I want to spend this money renting, throwing this money down a hole renting, or do I want to spend this money enjoying new experiences? And let me tell you, just to kind of encourage the thinking around this. I've never been to that side of the world. I've never been to Indonesia. Never been to Australia. None of that. There's a whole different way of life. Okay. When you live in America, we live in a Christian country. The most predominant religion in America is Christianity. I'm not saying everybody's most diligent or anything. I'm just saying that that's the way we're oriented. That's not what Indonesia was. It was in Bali. I think that place is Hindu. I'm not Hindu. I'm Christian. But I'm suddenly sitting there and I'm looking at a country where Hindu is the primary religion, where the attitudes are very different. They do basically they make like these little shrines, like some religious thing they do. They'll just take little baskets, put these purple flowers in them, and then just put like a lot of other little random things in there, just little cheap baskets, and they just leave them at different places on their journey. I don't fully get it. I think it's like a blessing or something. So maybe you're going to work and in front of the door to the office, you drop one of these little things just to kind of bless your work day or something like that. You see these things everywhere in the most random places. I mean, you'll see one in an intersection. Who the hell dropped this in an intersection? Like, traffic laws are not that. Somebody came. Owning things is more valuable than renting things. True words. I almost bought a home in 2019. I wish I went through with it. I was afraid of being house poor as some of my family members. Sheila, let me tell you a story because you are absolutely correct. Owning things is way more valuable. This is the thing that I will never forget this because it was just it's like a weird situation. I live in Hoboken, New Jersey. It's an expensive town. It's always been an expensive town. When I first moved out here 20 years ago, I came out here to work for a company that Fortune 100. Well, I came out here to work for Pfizer. So Pfizer's got crazy money. They don't care. They're one of the richest kids on the block, and they know it. They gave everybody these weird deals because they wanted to lock people in. And they said, anybody who we move out here to go to work for us, if you buy a house in the first year of working here, we will cover all your closing costs. So all you have to do is make the down payment. That's a crazy deal. I mean, I had never owned anything in my life. I was a renter. I was always bouncing around, but I was looking at this deal thinking, well, that's a lot of money. I mean, closing costs, that's thousands and thousands of dollars that you can be looking at. And there was a house that I had saved, and I had a nice nest egg saved up, but it was more because I was working someplace. They were paying us well because there was a lot of competition. Is out in San Francisco where big tech was stealing everybody, so they paid us well. They ended up laying us all off, and they gave us these big fat severance packages. So I had this big fat severance package, and I had been making a lot of cash. I had a lot of cash on me, more cash than I'd ever had on me at any time in my life before. And I come out here, and Pfizer's giving me this deal, and I thought I can actually buy some. I can buy a house. I can really buy a house. Now you can do 20% down, and then you don't have to pay PMI, but you don't have to do that. You can pay 5% down. You have to pay PMI, but you can buy a much bigger house. You can buy 4 times the size of house that you could buy if you try to do 20%. And the PMI is only for 3 years, so you're fine. There was this house on the main street in Hoboken. It was huge brownstone. I mean, this thing is 4 stories? And the way it was set up, it could be 4. Basically, I could have turned it into 4 single-family homes, or just made it one big frat house with 4 stories. I was a young guy, so I was still in that frat boy kind of mentality. Now I looked at this house, realtor showing it to me, and I was thinking, I could afford it. Now I would need to find 3 tenants because I would need to rent out these other 3 levels, but it's not that hard in Hoboken, the place where I live. Plenty of people want to live here because it's easy to get in and out of Manhattan if they work there. I didn't buy this house because it would have taken all that money that I had. I would have been house broke, and I would need those tenants because if I didn't have the tenants, I wouldn't be able to make the mortgage. But with the tenants, the tenants would have basically covered the mortgage, and I would have had my money in my pocket. I just didn't want to go through all that work. I didn't know where the housing market was going to go. Housing market, spiked dropped, spiked again. That 4-unit house ended up appreciating to be worth an extra $2 million. And when I saw it, when I looked it up like years later, I was just like curious, like, how much is this house selling for now? I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, this house is worth $2 million more than I would have gotten it for. If I bought that house way back then and I was house broke for a year or 2 years, I'd have $2 million in my pocket right now that I don't have. An extra $2 million because I would have chosen to buy big instead of buy small. Ownership and what it can do. Now, don't get me wrong. I still bought in Hoboken. Bought a 2-bedroom unit because I knew that I've got this extra unit. I can rent out this extra unit. Renting one extra room was a lot simpler to me than renting 3. Just not so much of a headache. And my home has appreciated tremendously. But ownership and going big and kind of thinking long term, sort of seeing where things can go, that's where it's at. Renting, if you're renting, you got to think about owning. Just move into ownership. Kind of understand that if you own your house, the money you're paying, it's more like you're putting it in a bank account. You can't access it immediately, but it's your money and it's sitting there waiting on you. And one day you can take it back. When you rent, you're just giving that money away. So yeah, totally agree with you on the whole idea of owning being so much better than renting. And yeah, I was even trying to, part of what I was talking about before was that I was on a dating show and I was explaining to the women on the show that I was looking for, kind of what I was looking for. But I said, I'm in a good space financially. So I don't need a woman who's busy. I need a woman who's got fun free time because you don't have to worry about rent. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. I've got a house, got a spare room. I have a daughter who I co-parent with. She's here half the time. Half the time she's not. So it was a lot of things. There were a lot of things in there. And I don't think everyone was understanding kind of what that could look like. A lot of people were more caught up in their schedules and thinking, well, what if I don't have the kind of free time you want? And I thought, well, I'm looking for someone whose schedule fits with mine. That's what I'm looking for. But what they weren't necessarily seeing, with this one, what they weren't necessarily seeing was, how much money do you save if you're not renting? If you don't have to, if you suddenly didn't have to pay rent anymore, how much would you save? Or if you suddenly were renting your place out, how much extra money would you make? One of the situations that I've realized, given the area that I'm in, because I'm right outside Manhattan, it's actually more profitable for me to Airbnb my place than it is for me to rent it. If I rent it, there's a nice steady stream of income that would come in. But if you Airbnb, especially if you Airbnb and tie it to events, there's a lot more to be made by just Airbnb. One of the things that is a huge draw in Manhattan is New Year's. Everybody wants to come here, see the ball drop. People travel from all around the world to be in Manhattan to see the ball drop on New Year's. From where I live, you can hop on the train into Penn Station. They kind of shut down the Port Authority stops, but you can go into Penn Station. That's like a 15-minute train ride. And then you can walk up to Times Square. That's maybe a 15-minute walk. So in a half hour from where I live, you can be in Times Square. That's important because you want to make some money in Hoboken and you own something, Airbnb it. Airbnb it during New Year's. You can charge crazy prices during New Year's because people will pay to have access to Manhattan and Times Square for the event. There are lots of other, when you're in Manhattan, there are tons of other events that happen around here. You've got, and that's not even considering New Jersey. You've got everything that's going on with Manhattan itself, Broadway, lots of stuff going on in the music scene and the cooking scene, and the TV scene. Tons and tons of things are here. New Jersey has tons and tons of things, mainly around events, golf tournaments, some small tennis tournaments. But basically, suddenly, if you buy and you own, you got the freedom to start doing very interesting things that you just can't do if you rent. So for people who are trying to build, you're starting to lay out a plan of, let's take a look at the kind of job you have and whether you can improve or not. It's not that hard to find jobs that pay $40,000, $50,000 a year. It's not hard to find them, but sometimes you might have to decide whether you're willing to make some of the changes that you want to make to have them. Because the job that pays that kind of money might be 100 miles away. Or it might require you to take night classes for 6 months to learn a specific skill that they're going to need. There are plenty of jobs out there making that, making 40, 50. Plenty of jobs out there making more. Just, the more you make, the more you're going to have to work at being qualified for the positions. But generally, you can do well without having to be a genius, without having to be a corporate slave. You just have to make decisions about what you're willing to change in your life to get what you want. Now, the big idea should always be, kind of long term. Like, big picture play, what do I want out of life? To guys who don't want to do anything with their life other than play video games and eat potato chips, you don't really need much. You don't need much of a job. It's not an expensive lifestyle, but you do need to think long term. That's fun when you're 20. When you're 50, do you want to look back on your life and just kind of say, I played a lot of Fortnite, ate a lot of Funyuns, no kids, no spouse, no anything. That's where the rubber kind of meets the road for a lot of people. And honestly, that's the thing that I worry about. I feel a little bit bad for some of my peers who are women who are in their early 40s, because these are some smart women who've worked at building their careers. They're successful. They've got big time. They're directors in Fortune 500 companies. But now they're 41, or now they're 42, and now they want to start a family, but they've only got a couple of years left on the clock, and they don't have someone who's actively in their life, and you just start to think, you got 2 years here. If you've got like above average standards for a man, like understanding how hard it can be just to start relationships that are healthy today, that's a tough spot. It's a very tough spot to sit back and think you got 2 years to have a kid and you don't necessarily have a guy in your life right now. Because there are a lot of steps. You got to meet him, fall in love, get engaged, get married, get pregnant. just going through all of that in 2 years, that's fast. That's tight. You might be able to pull it off, but that's not. You know, you have to start taking a look at just the math, saying, is this something you think you're going to be able to do? I had a conversation with a woman. She was a vice president of marketing. I don't remember the company, but it was a Manhattan company. I think it was an investment company. Really smart woman, interesting. She had, just great life experiences. Fun to talk to. We met. We went to. We were in Manhattan at Bryant Park. This was back in the winter, so you still had the ice skating rink in the middle of Bryant Park. One of the fun things to do in New York, you just kind of go out on a nice day. You got your jacket on, but you're not freezing. And you can just kind of check out the ice skaters. You sort of laugh because, some people clearly never skated before. Then you get a couple of people who are like pros. Sometimes you'll see like that little 12-year-old that's faster and more graceful than anybody else out there, doing all the spins and flips. You're like, all right, you go, kid. You got some talent. So we're out here, we're enjoying this day. And I'm talking to her, and I remember the point where the conversation kind of went left. And it was because she was just, she was telling me her story. I have a daughter, I have a 10-year-old daughter. I've always said, so, me and her mom didn't work out. We just, as time progressed, we couldn't work out. But what did work is that we got this great kid who we both care about, who we both work, we're both involved in her life, both raising her up to be, a well-adjusted human being. And this woman just talked about, kind of the situation that she was dealing with. I don't remember how old she was, 42, 43. So she just kind of says, she spent her life focusing on her career. She spent her life building herself up to be the corporate success that she was. And she was. And she was a vice president of marketing at a big Manhattan company. Who knows how much money she made? But she couldn't have kids anymore. And she said that, she had to come to terms with the fact that, she was going to have this life regret, which is that she was never going to have kids of her own. Now, I think that part of what she liked about me was that I had a daughter who was, my daughter's 10. So the thought of her dating someone who had a kid, especially kind of a younger kid, who she could kind of be involved with a bit, that was appealing to her. The thought of raising a kid, even if it wasn't necessarily hers, just the thought of raising a kid and getting to enjoy that whole maternal piece, that was something she liked because she, looking for a place where she could put that into her life. But for me, my thing is, I'm very careful about relationships and how my daughter is going to see me in relationships. And since I've been divorced, I have never introduced a woman to my daughter, not a woman I was dating. And it's not that I wouldn't, but it's more of me saying, I don't want people in and out of my daughter's life. I don't want her to have that kind of perception of relationships. I don't want her to have that perception of her dad and how her dad is approaching relationships. And I'm not saying I'm a player or anything like that. I'm just saying, if I'm going out with a woman and I'm not convinced that she's going to be there for the long term, that we've got long-term potential, I'm not going to introduce her to my daughter. I don't want to have to deal with, her building an attachment to a woman who, a year later, 2 years later, might not still be there. And that's part of That's a very real situation to think about. The first relationship I was in after my divorce, I don't even know if it's fair to call it a relationship, but there was a woman who I'd worked with. And it's so funny because we worked together kind of at the end of my towards the end of my marriage, and there was an attraction. And I was like, I can't work closely with her. I was glad she was in Florida. I'm up here in New Jersey, so we worked at different offices. Just occasionally there'd be conferences. It was a very easy person to deal with. Talking to her was easy. We had similar sense of humor. Like everything was just like easy. I'm like, I got to keep some distance. I'm going to just create a healthy distance here. I mean, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to be one of these guys who pretends like I don't notice other women and don't find them attractive. And I noticed her. She was attractive. I just had to make that conscious decision to say, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where things could get weird because I don't want to be unfaithful. So maintain healthy distance. But we were both attracted to each other. Now, after I got divorced, she was the first person I called up. It's like, hey, I'm not married anymore. So we don't have to kind of keep this wall up. And she was in the same place where she was like, okay. I mean, she respected the situation when I was married. She didn't want to like pursue a married man. If I had pursued her, I think she would have been cool with it back then, but we didn't. We just didn't. But now, didn't have to worry about that. Hey, I wasn't full. I was separated, but we were like my wife was out of the house. We were in the process of getting the divorce finalized. So that to me is not infidelity because it's like, okay, look, we are getting a divorce. It's just a matter of waiting for paperwork to go through. Now she and we had a very fun relationship, because it was just easy. She was fun to talk to, easy to joke around with. It just worked. We were just very, very similar people. And ultimately, what happened, and she was the adult there. She just said she couldn't do it anymore. She's like, I can't keep doing this. We got into the conversation. I'm thinking, what's up? And she said, like you too much. And we're in a weird place because you live in New Jersey and you've got a life there and you're not going to leave. And I live here in Florida and I got a life here and I'm not going to leave. And she had a kid. Her daughter's older than mine. Her daughter's probably in college now. At the time, this was a few years ago. I'll guess her daughter was probably around 12, 13-ish. So, she was just sort of saying, with us doing kind of this, with us sort of hanging out, she's in this weird place. It's easy to get to Florida from, a flight from New York to Florida. It's easy. Tons of flights back and forth every day. They're not expensive. We could see each other all the time if we wanted to, monthly. But it was just quick. It was long weekends. Sometimes I'd go down there for work. Sometimes she'd come up here for work. We both worked at the same company in different offices. Tons of opportunities to interact with each other, but it was always quick. Like, hey, we're here for a couple of days. Not the kind of thing where you could build a relationship. She of the women who I've dated since being divorced, she was the one who I liked the most. But I didn't introduce her to my daughter because as much as I liked her, she was in Florida and I was in New Jersey. And I didn't know that there was going to be something long-term that could work there. My daughter's 10, so she's got 8 more years before she's out of school. Um, and even with that, 8 years from now, I'm not going to be thinking about moving to Florida and trying to rekindle that. I'll be headed down a different direction. So it becomes that becomes like a high hurdle meeting my kid. But it's part of building. And when I was talking to women about sort of what I wanted, and saying, I'm willing to, you know, build a life for a woman that lets her be a housewife. I was serious about that. But there's just, there's like a mindset in women that you're looking for. You say, are you someone who I can have around long term? Are you someone who I want to have around long term? I think with a long term mindset. I think about when I bought my house, I thought about how to buy something that's going to be profitable for me in the long term. And I knew that buying a place and renting out a unit in it was more profitable than buying a one bedroom that I just lived in for myself. And lo and behold, years later, I was right. Kind of to the point I made earlier, there's a house I could have made that really took off. I could have bought that one and been retired right now. But hindsight's 2020. But still, it was a solid. Home ownership was a solid investment. The money that you build, the equity that you build, all of that. Trying to find people who want to build over the long term is tricky. That's I would say one of the hardest things to do at this point. Is find people who really get the long term piece. I can find lots of women now, in their early 40s. Again, it goes back. Career-minded women want to have kids. They want to get married, and they're in a hurry to get married. But that's just a tough spot to be in, because as a man, part of what I'm thinking is, do I believe that you're someone who's going to be in this relationship for the long term? Or do I think that you're someone who just wants to have a kid? And, if you're married, there's more financial security around it. But once you have that kid, you can become a different person. And when women are in a hurry to get married, they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Because as a man, you want to sit back and say, are you someone who I believe is going to stick around through thick and thin? Or are you someone who I think is going to bounce if things get hard? If things go south, what's going to happen? So that's just one of those pieces that it's hard. You really want to see people be successful in their relationships, but that it's one of the challenges. It's just one of the challenges that we face right now. People are waiting until kind of it's late in the game, and then they're in a hurry. But now they need to find someone who's in a hurry like them, and that may not always work. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears for a second. Let's talk about investments and if you're building and things to think about. This will be a good piece to focus on for people who are thinking about just profit in general and what they want to do. Part of what you really need to think about is whether or not you are investing, whether or not you put yourself in a position where you can actually invest. You got some money, you're paying your bills, fine. Let's find a better job so that you're not just kind of going hand to mouth paying the bills. You build up. Now you're actually paying your bills and you got a little bit left over. Sure, you're going to enjoy yourself a bit, but part of what we're doing here is we're trying to build to the long term. We're trying to think about being retired, not having to work until you're 65 and then wondering how you're going to make it through the next 15, 20 years because nobody's going to hire you at that point. Having a home does a lot. One of the best things you can do is, have a home in an area that is hot, that's attractive. Good school districts are generally attractive. Close proximity to big cities is generally attractive because there's always going to be demand for houses in places like that. There can be situational things as well. I live in New Jersey, huge Jewish community in the New Jersey, New York area. Definitely more so than I was used to growing up in Dallas. I bring this up because I grew up with no understanding of Jewish traditions and culture because I didn't really know that many Jewish people when I was in Dallas. Came out here and met tons of people, worked with tons of people who were Jewish. One of the things I learned about was kind of this practice. I guess it's practicing. I'm not sure if it's practicing Jewish people or I'm not sure how they break that out. But basically what you have is kind of Friday from sundown until like Sunday at sundown, they don't do electricity. No lights, no cars. All the electricity is off. Why is that important? Well, what you have is you have Jewish people who are going to their synagogues on the weekends, and they have to walk there, can't drive. No their tradition, no electricity. That means they need to live within walking distance of their synagogue. Mile, 2 miles. I don't know what they're going to say walking distance is, but you get the idea. Walking distance. They're going to look for houses in that close proximity. One of the most interesting strategies I heard, and I would love to be able to take advantage of this, but you have to. It has to be situational, and the cat's kind of out of the bag now. But there was a woman, very smart black woman, bought property around a synagogue that was being built in a part of New Jersey that's probably about 30 minutes north of me. Now, what she knew was synagogue is being built here. And there are lots of properties in this area that aren't that expensive to buy right now. But once that synagogue is built, there are going to be a lot of Jewish people who want to buy up property around here because it's in walking distance of the synagogue. So she bought a lot of properties up, sat on for a bit. Synagogue gets built, property values shoot up, made out like a bandit. There are tons of examples of people buying property because they had a good strategy and they made money, or some people just bought property and accidentally lucked up because the area that they owned property in appreciated. They didn't plan it, they never saw it, they never thought about it, but it appreciated. And the point was that because they owned, they were able to take advantage of improved property values. Property values where I live have improved. I live in an expensive area. It was expensive when I bought there. It's been expensive the whole time I lived here. I didn't expect the property values to skyrocket the way they have. I'm happy that they did, but I can't claim any grand plan. I didn't foresee it. It just kind of worked out. Now, if I'd been renting this whole time, I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of any of that. But because I owned, I could. So you get the job so that you're doing more than just paying the bills. You get the house, so now you're not just throwing money away, on rent. And then you start asking, what else can you do? What else can you do with your money? The goal, your purpose can become retiring when you're 60, retiring when you're 50. I don't know. Retiring at 65, as opposed to just being laid off, being put out to pasture and having to figure it out. Setting yourself up for life. Solid purpose. The next things you can ask yourself are other things you could do with your money. Now, I do not advocate, just spend all your time working, don't enjoy your life, live your life. If you don't live your life until you're 65, well, I think you missed the boat. But don't forget about the fact that you're not going to be working all your life. At some point, the money you make is going to need to sustain you, well beyond, the next few years. If you're 65 and you're planning to live until 80, it's 15 years. And how much money are you spending, annually now? Okay, so how much money do you need? Multiply that by 15. If you plan to maintain the exact same lifestyle you have now, and then think, are you on track to do that? As far as investing goes, I'm going to talk about something that's not for everybody right now, but it's definitely something. It's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about, and I'm going to talk about it in a way that makes it less scary for people, but also gives them the thought, is this something that I'm willing to do? Is this something that I could try? And if so, what could happen? Okay. Crazy idea for the night. Cryptocurrency. Yep. Bitcoin, all that stuff. You may not understand it. That's fine. Here's the thing to understand. As an investment stock, it's all over the place. It's way up, it's way down. People become princes, people become paupers because it's been bouncing like this. And if you bought low and sold high, you did great. But if you bought high and sold low, you lost your shirt. That is a very risky portfolio if you do it in the short term. Funny thing is, it's actually not a risky portfolio if you do it and you hold. In an 18-month window, cryptocurrency always seems to push to new highs. So, yeah, if it was $20,000, okay, and it falls down to 10, in an 18-month window, it's going to get back up above 20. And if you look at kind of crypto, it was 20, then it hit 30, 40, jumped to 60. Yeah. You can find yourself in a position where you put your money in at 30 and it fell. And you're thinking, what do I do? What you do is you just hold on to it. You have to be willing to leave your cash in there for the long haul. But if you can leave cash in there for 18 months, and if you can stomach watching it bounce around, well, whatever you bought it at, it's going to push through that high. It will eventually push through. It keeps pushing through. We'll come back to like crypto and we'll talk a little bit about all of the mechanics of it in a minute. But what's important is if you've got your money sitting in the bank, just in a bank account, you're getting less than 1% on that. You're basically getting nothing on your money. and you're trying to figure out a way to build your money out. Now, why do I bring up crypto? Well, I bring up crypto because it's got one of these interesting X factors, and it's a way that you can invest small, and as long as you're disciplined about how you do it, it can work. Okay, so let's kind of talk about cryptocurrency and from an investment strategy, like what we can do. Don't invest big money. Don't take your life savings and dump it in there. If you want to risk win big, sure, you can do that. You can become a multimillionaire overnight. But if you have a storm and you have to weather that storm, what are you going to do? You just took every dime you had and you stuck it into Bitcoin. That's cool if you can wait 18 months for it to grow. But you got some medical bills, some automotive bills. So you got some bills that have to be paid, or things are going to be confiscated. What are you going to do when that kind of stuff happens? Because that's where things can get tricky. Think of these X factors. You hear these games, if you have a dollar and then you multiply it by 2 and multiply it by 2 and multiply it by 2, like at what point do you have, a million, all that stuff. Okay. It's kind of the same idea. And let's play this out. Okay. Let's say I'm going to just use a round number that's easy. So you have $1,000 that you're willing to play around and invest. You can afford to put $1,000 in. Okay. You double that, you got 2,000. You double that, you got 4,000. You double that, you got 8,000. You double it again, you got $16,000. Okay. You just made 16 times your investment. Now that's 5 doubles. Which, if you're talking about cryptocurrency, okay, on a slow timeline, that could be 8 years. If you're playing with it and you're investing in it over the long haul, and you don't just hold it, no. You buy, you wait for it to hit a high, and you sell. And maybe you don't sell at the very tip-top peak of the high, but the point is, it gets to a point where it doubled for you, and then you sell. And then you watch, because it bounces up and down. So you watch for it to dip down again. You wait. And when it dips back down, you say, you know what? It's low. I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to buy. And I'm going to let that money sit there. And if I got to let it sit there for a year and a half, I'm just not going to look at it. But when it spikes, I'm going to sell and I'm going to double again. Suddenly, your 1,000, that money that you took one deposit of $1,000, something you could afford. All your other money you've put into other things. Put it into the S&P 500, tech stock, Google. Google's a very smart idea. You just let this piece sit here, and you just did something simple. And suddenly, this piece can take off. And I'm oversimplifying because I'm saying, it doubles. All right, let's talk about how Bitcoin's been moving. Bitcoin is currently trading roughly in the 20s. I haven't looked at it in a couple of days. The last high was 60. So in the next year and a half, just given the way it moves, a 3x on your investment. $1,000 becomes 3,000. And it's not 18 months, it's more like 12 months. If you've got the ability to buy and hold, you could be looking at a 3x in 12 months. And then you sell. And now you got that money sitting there and you just don't touch it. And you wait for things to dip. And when they dip, you do it again. And you do it again, and you do it again. And you set up a goal for yourself. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to use this money. I want enough money so that I can buy an investment property. I want enough money so that I can, become debt free. Whatever it is, kind of think through what you want to do with that money so that you're not just chasing higher gains. You're not always just sitting here saying, well, how much more can I get? You actually have a goal and you achieve it, and then you relax. Then you hit that retirement idea that you've been pursuing. There are people who have made fortunes on Bitcoin, fortunes on it, because they got in early, they held on, they sold when it was high, and they've been huge successes. There are people who've lost their shirt because they bought big. They never assumed it would go back down, but it will always come back down. And they got themselves in trouble because they couldn't afford to hold on and wait for it to spike back up. If you don't really understand Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, I'll talk about it briefly because there is some value in understanding kind of what you're investing in. I mean, Bitcoin's currently trading for $20,000 each, and you don't need $20,000 to buy Bitcoin. You can go to Coinbase and you can spend $50 and buy a share of a Bitcoin. That's possible. Whatever dollar amount you have, you can invest, and you'll get a portion of one, and you're on your way. But here's something to think about. This is sort of the trick. Is a Bitcoin worth $20,000? I don't think so. No, it's not. Not when you look at what it does. Is a Bitcoin worth $20,000 today? Yeah. Is a Bitcoin potentially going to be worth $100,000 in a year? Yeah. Not because of what it does, but just because of the interest in it. Bitcoins are kind of like baseball cards. The first generation Babe Ruth baseball card, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, it's worth a lot of money. Not because of what it is, it's just a little piece of cardboard and paint. But it's because there are people who are passionate about what it represents, and they will pay for the story behind what it represents. Bitcoin is kind of the same way. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, that all makes sense. Let's kind of talk about this. This is rough overview, super simplified. Neighborhood watch. You got a community, it was policed, and you say, you know what, I don't want the police to take care of my community. Because the people who are police don't live here, they don't really care about the community. This is just a job. They're here to get paid. And basically, once their shift is done, they're gone. Community's got to exist, ongoing. I need people who care about this community to be part of it and to police it for me. Now I don't have like one central group. I don't have one police officer saying this is what happened. This person crashed into that person. It's like, no. I want the community to watch. I want to know that 4 people saw this accident, and I want to talk to them. What did you see? What did you see? What did you see? What did you see? They're all saying the same thing. It was their fault. Okay. We know who was at fault. I have a lot of people who all sat down and saw the accident, and they told me what they saw, and it was a consistent story. Got it. You got to pay the fine. You got to pay to get this other person's car fixed. Neighborhood watch, that's basically how blockchain works, this whole technology. Now, what's important here is, we're talking about neighborhood watch. Why do people want to report on what's happening in their neighborhood? Well, one, they care about the neighborhood, but 2, they're like, you know what? If we do a check and you're one of the people who we talk to who tells us what happened, I'll give you a coupon. Like, you can go get a free cup of coffee at the coffee shop. Yeah, this is just, incentive. It's encouragement for people to keep tabs on what's going on. So I'm giving out these coffee coupons to people. Just, like, here you go. $2 cup of coffee at, Joe's around the corner. I'll just toss them out, and the neighborhood watch works. And people are cool with it. And they're like, yeah, I like keeping track of what's going on in the community anyway. But this coffee coupon is a nice benefit to motivate me to pay attention. That's kind of how cryptocurrency works. Cryptocurrency is like that coffee coupon. A Bitcoin is like that coffee coupon. Now, different cryptos are like different neighborhoods. It's a rough translation. So Bitcoin is the Bitcoin neighborhood. Litecoin, oh, okay, down the street there's this other neighborhood, that Litecoin neighborhood, and they have coffee coupons to go to the Litecoin coffee shop. That's basically the idea. Now here's what happens. You can look at a cup of coffee and say, well, a cup of coffee is worth $2. All right. So essentially, this coffee coupon's worth $2. All right, got it. I understand. Well, here's what happens. You can start to say, hey man, I want a soda and some chips, $2. Well, can I give you this coffee coupon instead of the $2? Yeah, sure, that's cool. It's got the same value. I'm fine with that. I get coffee at Joe's all the time. Sure, easy swap. Well, now it's starting to take on a different value. Now it's not just a reward for keeping track of what's going on. Now it's become kind of like a currency in the community. If you shop at Joe's and get some coffee there, all right, there you go. But other people start to find out about Joe's coffee and these coupons. And other people say, you know what? I can get one of these coupons. I kind of want one of these coupons. I can spend it on this coffee, or I can just save it. I have 20 of these. I don't want to carry this cash around. Instead of 20 bucks in cash, I'll get 10 coupons. They're worth $2 each. Great. Same value as long as I'm in that town. However, things continue to grow. Other people find out about the coupons. And here's where things get weird. Someone says, you know what? I want one of those coupons. I think they're interesting. Yeah, I like this whole idea of rewarding people for the neighborhood watch. Can I get one? Yeah, sure, $2. Well, hold up. This guy over here is telling me he'll give me $3 for it. Why? Because I want it, and there aren't that many of them going around. So I'll give you $3 because I just want it. Well, I'm going to take $3 instead of 2. Why not? Now you got this coupon that's being traded for $3 because somebody wants it that bad. Somebody else comes in and says, hey, can I have it? Oh, now you're not selling it to them for $2. You're like, well, yeah, I'll sell it to you for $3. Okay, fine. Great. Okay, people are paying $3 for these coupons. And I keep selling for $3. There aren't that many of them. So eventually, hey, I want one of those coupons. Well, why do you want it? Because I just want to have it. They're cool. I'll give you $5. I'll give you 10. I'll give you 15. I'll give you 20,000. It's a $2 coffee coupon. There's just this competition because people find out about them. It gets popular. It's like a trading card. Ooh, it's interesting. It's rare. I want it. There's a story behind it. That cup of coffee at Joe's is still $2. But the coupons have this value. Because maybe, here's what people don't know. Maybe Joe figures out how to make the best coffee on the planet. Maybe one day you walk into Joe's and think, this cup of coffee is not worth $2. This cup of coffee is worth $200,000. This is the purest bean from the cleanest mountains in the most perfect region of the planet. Persian kings are sending armies out to get these cups of coffee. That's how good this stuff is. This is the epitome of coffee. And I will pay whatever it takes to get it. And if I can't get you the cash, well, you know what? I've got this coupon that's still worth a cup of coffee. If I paid $2 for it and that cup of coffee is worth 200,000, I got great value. But that's not really where Bitcoin's going to go. It's more like you paid $10 for this coupon, and at the end of the day, it's really only worth $2. Okay. We don't know what a Bitcoin is going to be worth at the end of the day. We don't really know what a Bitcoin is going to do. What we do know is that the neighborhood watch idea is a good idea. It gives people a little bit more freedom to spend their money the way they want to move on the internet the way they want to. And regardless of how much you think the Bitcoin is worth, the idea of more freedom on the internet is valuable. And until we find another way to encourage people to help provide that, we need people keeping tabs. We need the neighborhood watch. And this cryptocurrency idea, this neighborhood watch, it's going to stick around. It's here to stay. We just don't know how big it's going to be. All right. This one a lot longer and went in a very different direction than I planned. It was interesting. I had a couple of people pop in with comments, so started trying to address those more so than I thought. However, I think I'll do more of these. I think that there's something to just kind of these open conversations about leveling up, about thinking about what you want to do. If your goal is to try to figure out how you can improve your financial situation, we don't need to get into a million intricate details. We can just look at simple steps. Start asking some questions to say, what can you do that's easy, and then why aren't you doing it?